Koei was a gaming company perhaps best known for making Romance of the Three Kingdoms games. Then they merged with Tecmo in 2010. And together they made more Romance of the Three Kingdoms games. But just before that merger, Koei Canada developed an interesting, seldomly talked about futuristic racer. As the new year began, I started to take a look at the logistics of keeping a full collection of Xbox 360 games. And I decided that I would make a point throughout the year to try the games I've never played before to see if they're actually worth keeping around. And since the market hasn't cooled off completely yet for certain Xbox 360 games, maybe I can undo some of the damage I've done to my credit cards in trying to put this collection together. So why start this particular journey with an obscure B-tier racing game? Well, Fatal Inertia isn't one of the super rare or expensive ones, but it does seem to hover around the $50 mark, and I could use $50 if this turns out to not be a keeper. Fatal Inertia is a combat racing game released by Koei in the early days of the Xbox 360. It was originally slated to be a PlayStation 3 release, but problems programming for that console led to it being ported over to the 360 first in 2007. It did eventually come to the PS3 with some upgrades as a digital-only title called Fatal Inertia EX in 2008. It's the 22nd century in the world of Fatal Inertia, and a small handful of corporations own every aspect of human life. And so, of course, extreme death sports are now the entertainment for the masses, because that's just how dystopias work. According to the pre-rendered intro cinematic, you're a hot racing lady who is going to destroy the system from the inside and return society to the people. Ha, no, I'm just kidding. You just want to win races. If you do not have the manual for Fatal Inertia, you will definitely want to play through the optional tutorial, as the game itself rarely explains anything to you. If you've ever played a combat racer, you'll understand the gist of it. There are power-ups and weapons and different types of races with different win conditions, but the specifics of each aren't quite clear if you just go into it cold. For example, you may figure out that this bit of iconography indicates rockets, which of course you can shoot forward. But using the alternate firing button, which often will fire an item behind you, instead gives you a rocket-powered turbo boost when you have this one in your inventory. See, I would have just thought it would shoot a rocket behind you. The game is also not good at explaining when you've acquired upgrades for your vehicles or where to go to install them. The garage option isn't a part of career mode, it's an offshoot of the main menu. Supposedly any upgrades you make will take effect in either quick race or career mode. They might also work in multiplayer, but no one is online, so I can't say for sure. The servers appear to still be up though if you want to create a match and wait. Controlling your vehicles will seem a little squirrely at first, mainly because you're dealing with hovercrafts instead of something with wheels. If you're like me, you're just going to want to hold down the accelerator and blast through each level, but I can tell you that that is not going to work. There will be very tight turns that require precision steering and speed control, so patience will be in order. Otherwise, your inertia will be fatal as you crash into a cave wall or other obstacle. And there is no rewind feature here. That's a helpful bit of accessibility that came a year or two later in this generation. I was surprisingly impressed by how well this game's visuals held up. Yes, they are very much of that time, but they're solid and colorful. Almost everything has that plastic, textureless army men look, but again, that's just the way a lot of these games looked at the time. Sometimes in lesser games from this era, you might feel like the polygons are just gonna fly apart and everything is going to freak out. But aside from some screen tearing on occasion and some texture pop-in when levels first start loading, the visuals and performance are pretty good overall. I also dig most of the soundtrack, with the exception of the jaunty jungle beat that plays in the forest levels. The bulk of the music has this industrial synth thing going on, but Then you get all bouncy and fun when you go out into the woods. I don't need that. And I doubt the megalo corporations would be piping funky jams into your headset while you're death racing. Fatal Inertia is one of those games that's only available physically on one console, the Xbox 360. There is no PC version at all, the digital 360 store is closed, and while it appears to still be available to purchase digitally on the PS3, that store is increasingly unreliable. Owning this disc is a little piece of gaming history in that regard. But is it worth keeping, or should I get the cash for it while I can? Honestly, I'm a little torn. If you'd asked me after the first half a dozen races, I would have said I'm hanging on to it. But the difficulty curve is pretty brutal, and you quickly realize that you're going to have to eke out third place finishes in increasingly lengthy tournaments in the hopes of eventually acquiring an upgrade that will let you go back and perfect the races you've been banging your head against for the last hour. Yep, it's one of those where you're going to be just barely good enough to unlock the next race, but to win each race outright, you'll have to come back and do it again when you've got more gear. Now, another reason I wanted an Xbox 360 collection, especially of games that are not backwards compatible, like Fatal Inertia, was to beef up my Xbox gamer score before the 360 version of Xbox Live eventually shuts down. Which it will one day, there's no doubt that that'll happen. One day the games you play on a 360 won't be talking to any official servers anywhere. However, in the case of Fatal Inertia, most of the achievement list requires perfection. Win each series of races in first place, etc. And the time that will take is just more than I'm willing to invest. I love racing games, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to want to play this one for the length of time it will take to get all of the required upgrades to then go back and essentially do it all again. I'd rather just play Forza Horizon 5. I do think I'll want to revisit this from time to time in the future, for the occasional hover race here and there, but I'll probably be perfectly fine with the PS3 version of the game, which apparently I was fortunate enough to already own. Despite a few differences between the two games, having access to that will give me exactly what I want, and I can go ahead and try to get that $50 so I can pay my water bill or, buy some groceries, which is how I think the world of Fatal Inertia probably fell apart too. Well, that, coupled with some dipshit billion